Hello and welcome back to Jekyll and Hyde Annotate with an Examiner. We are now on part 3 of the final chapter, chapter 10. In the last video, we discussed how Jekyll was actually losing control over his abilities to transform in and out of Hyde. And because of the dangerous situation that he was faced in, the last part that we discussed, he had chosen to remain Jekyll. So he had chosen never to transform back to Hyde ever again. So let's continue to read. And just before we begin, actually, you might want to go and grab your copy of the text, a highlighter, a pen, as well as a notepad so that you can keep record of some key quotations and use them for revision in the future. So press play when you are ready. Let's get started. Yes, I preferred the elderly and discontented doctor, surrounded by friends and cherishing honest hopes. So he describes, he uses quite ironic language here when he's describing honest hopes. So the irony is seen here as all of the characters within the novella seem to live dishonest lives. And we've discussed this in such great length. So we've linked this to the theme of hypocrisy and the duality of man, which are the overriding themes of the entire novella. And we've discussed these in great detail. So if you haven't watched the previous videos, then I would highly encourage you to do that. And this quotation here, honest hopes, is another one that justifies this idea of hypocrisy and the duality of man. And bade a resolute farewell to the liberty, the comparative youth, the light step, leaping impulses and secret pleasures that I had enjoyed in the disguise of Hyde. So again, he's bidding farewell to his ability to transform into Hyde. I made this choice perhaps with some unconscious reservation, for I neither gave up the house in Soho nor destroyed the clothes of Edward Hyde, which still lay ready in my cabinet. So he's saying that part of him probably didn't fully give up on the hope of becoming Hyde because he didn't get rid of everything that he associates with Hyde. So the house in Soho, the clothes that Hyde wears. For 2 months, however, I was true to my determination. For 2 months, I led a life of such severity as I had never before attained to and enjoyed the compensation of an approving conscience. But time began at last to obliterate the freshness of my alarm. The praises of conscience began to grow into a thing of course. I began to be tortured with throes and longings, as of Hyde struggling after freedom, and at last, in an hour of moral weakness, I once again compounded and swallowed the transforming draught. So he stayed away from becoming Hyde for 2 months, and he felt like he was doing really well. He was able to restrict himself from this temptation that he'd previously felt, and he actually quite enjoyed being Jekyll again because of the clarity of conscience that he gained through this. But he did succumb to his temptations once more and transformed into Hyde. I do not suppose that, when a drunkard reasons with himself upon his vice, he is once out of 500 times affected by the dangers that he runs through his brutish physical insensibility. So he's likening this addiction to becoming Hyde as an addiction to alcoholism. So an alcoholic who returns to drink after a pause can become even more dangerously inflicted by alcoholism and even more of a danger to society. This is what he's saying. So again, more foreshadowing going on here. Neither had I, long as I had considered my position, made enough allowance for the complete moral insensibility and insensate readiness to evil, which were the leading characters of evil Edward Hyde. So he's saying his evil side had become stronger. Yet it was by these that I was punished. My devil had been long caged. He came out roaring. So this is another iconic quotation. You might want to make record of this on the notepad that I suggested that you have to make record of key quotations. So here we've got the metaphor used of devil and this idea of the devil coming out roaring, which emphasizes how trapped Jekyll felt by societal expectations and also the repercussions of the repression that he faced of hiding himself, of becoming the better person. So it's almost like keeping emotions and feelings hidden affects one's mental as well as physical health. So the absence of happiness makes one dangerous to oneself as well as society. I was conscious, even when I took the draught of a moral unbridled, a more furious propensity to eat ill. It must have been this, I suppose, that stirred in my soul that tempest of impatience with which I listened to the civilities of my unhappy victim. I declare at least before God, no man morally sane could have been guilty of that crime upon so pitiful a provocation. So the problem that once was one of natural and supernatural takes on a moral tone here. Authority becomes separated from morality when Jekyll feels all the guilt for Hyde's deeds. There is a religious undertone to this entire passage and the rest of the chapter as well. It's almost like Jekyll is confessing to his sins in fear of godly punishment, knowing that he will probably die soon. And that I struck in no more reasonable spirit than that in which a sick child may break a plaything. But I had voluntarily stripped myself of all those balancing instincts by which even the worst of us continues to walk with some degree of steadiness among temptations, and in my case, to be tempted, however slightly, was to fall. Instantly, the spirit of hell awoke in me and raged. So this is another really key quotation that you might want to record in your key quotation notebook. So we've got more metaphorical language used to associate Hyde to the devil here. The language almost mirrors religious imagery of Satan, showing how far Jekyll has strayed from religion and Christianity. Remember that the audience reading this in the 19th century would have been predominantly religious, okay? So there was obviously the battle between religion and science in the 19th century, but most of the readership would have been very religious, so this would have been very shocking for them. When Jekyll struggles to subdue Hyde, he cages the beast within. So we've spoken about the beast within throughout our analysis of Jekyll and Hyde, and we see further elements of this here, so that when it is later released, it emerges more determined to do evil. This leads to the murder of Sir Danvers Carew. With a transport of glee, I mauled the unresisting body, tasting delight from every blow. So this is him describing how he attacked Sir Danvers Carew. We've got the use of an animalistic imagery used to show how savage and animal-like Hyde is. Again, you might want to make notes of this key quotation. I mauled the unresisting body, tasting delight from every blow. So it's like he's an animal. He is a predator, and Sir Danvers Carew is his prey. The problem that has occurred with Jekyll's duplicity is that his two selves, though separate enough to lead their own lives, share the same memory. Now, in his confession letter, Jekyll recalls all the events of Hyde's life and the events of Jekyll's and can narrate the sensations of mauling Sir Carew. The problem that once was one of natural and supernatural, again, I'm going to emphasize this again, takes on a moral tone. So authority becomes separated from morality when Jekyll feels all the guilt for Hyde's deeds. And it was not till weariness had begun to succeed that I was suddenly, in the top fit of my delirium, struck through the heart by a cold thrill of terror. A mist dispersed. I saw my life to be forfeit, so he suddenly realized how awful a deed he had just committed and what his life had become, and he was terrified by this and fled from the scene of these excesses, at once glorifying and trembling. So again, we've got the just juxtaposing language used here. So he feels glorified but also scared, and my lust of evil gratified and stimulated, my love of life screwed to the topmost peg. I ran to the house in Soho, and to make assurance doubly sure, destroyed my papers. Thence I set out through the lamplit streets in the same divided ecstasy of mind. We've got the recurrent theme of juxtaposing language used throughout this to show how conflicted Jekyll was at becoming Hyde, gloating on my crime, light-headedly devising others in the future, and yet still hastening and still hearkening in my wake for the steps of the avenger. Hyde had a song upon his lips as he compounded the draught, and as he drank it pledged the dead man. The pangs of transformation had not done tearing him before Henry Jekyll, with streaming tears of gratitude and remorse, had fallen upon his knees and lifted his clasped hands to God. The veil of self-indulgence was rent from head to foot. I saw my life as a whole. I followed it up from the days of childhood, when I had walked with my father's hand, and through the self-denying toils of my professional life, to arrive again and again with the same sense of unreality at the damned horrors of the evening. I could have screamed aloud. I sought with tears and prayers to smother down the crowd of hideous images and sounds with which my memory swarmed against me. So he remembers vividly exactly what happened when he was Hyde. And it's this terrifying memory, almost like he's suffering with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that really terrifies him and fills him with absolute remorse. And still, between the petitions, the ugly face of my iniquity stared into my soul. As the acuteness of this remorse began to die away, it was succeeded by a sense of joy. The problem of my conduct was solved. Hyde was thenceforth impossible. Whether I would or not, I was now confined to the better part of my existence, and oh, how I rejoiced to think it. With what willing humility I embraced anew the restrictions of natural life. With what sincere renunciation I locked the door by which I had so often gone and come, and ground the key under my heel. So he decided once and for all that he will never become Hyde, and he was really rejoiced and happy by this final decision. The next day came the news that the murder had been overlooked, that the guilt of Hyde was patent to the world, and that the victim was a man high in public estimation. It was not only a crime, it had been a tragic folly. I think I was glad to know it. I think I was glad to have my better impulses thus buttressed and guarded by the terrors of the scaffold. Jekyll was now my city of refuge. Let but Hyde peep out an instant, and the hands of all men would be raised to take and slay him. So his decision to remain Jekyll is one that fills him with comfort and contentment. He's glad that even though he has murdered Sir Danvers Carew, that he'll never be found out, because he will never, ever become Hyde again. And that's the promise that he's making here. Okay, so that's the end of this section of the analysis of part 3 of chapter 10. Next week, we will be analysing part 4 and the final part, actually. I was going to split it up into 5 parts, but I think I'll split it up into 4. So next week, we will finish off our analysis of Jekyll and Hyde. Thank you again for joining me. If you have found these videos useful, then please remember to comment, like and subscribe, and also share our channel with your friends. Thank you. Bye.